Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Cyberpunk and what I love about Cyberpunk. So, before we go any further, let me just share for you why I'm doing this video today. One of my subscribers is Bloodlord RPG, and he has his own YouTube channel that is tabletop role-playing game focused. I'm a big fan of his channel, and basically, a while back, I did a video on Shadowrun 6th edition, and I really lamented my opinion of the rules system for that game, right? And Bloodlord RPG came on and said, hey, could you talk about, you talked about what you didn't like about this Cyberpunk-like game. Could you talk about what you do like about Cyberpunk? And that's a great request. I really appreciate the request, Bloodlord's RPG. Everybody go check out Bloodlord RPG's channel. And here we go. This is everything I love about Cyberpunk. So I do love Cyberpunk. So first and foremost, what do I love about Cyberpunk? So first and foremost about Cyberpunk is I love the books it generated. Okay, so the first thing I love about Cyberpunk is William Gibson. So William Gibson is an amazing author, and he birthed the entire Cyberpunk genre. Okay, and by the way, Cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction, in my opinion. All right, and he did this with two series. Okay, there's the Sprawl trilogy. I think the Sprawl trilogy is Neuromancer, Virtual Light, and Mona Lisa Drive. And then he did a follow-up trilogy to that called the Bridge trilogy. And by the way, the Sprawl trilogy was in the 80s, and the Bridge trilogy was really done in the 90s. Okay, and the Bridge trilogy in there was Idoru, and also All Tomorrow's Parties, and I'm forgetting one of the names, but those 6 books really comprise all of the very best of what Cyberpunk books are. And so Cyberpunk was born in the print medium, and I love that. I love books. I'm an author myself. And William Gibson, he really has an amazing mind, and he really birthed all of Cyberpunk, and his work is giving us joy today in things like Shadowrun, Cyberpunk 2020, the tabletop role-playing game, in Cyberpunk 2077. I know I'm not a video game player. I know a lot of you guys are, and ladies as well. And I know Cyberpunk 2077 is really exciting. Like, a lot of people are really excited about that game. I think it recently released. Congratulations! I'm glad you're enjoying that game. I'm not going to play it just because I really don't play video games much at all. I kind of feel like they have a bad ROI. They have a bad return on investment, not for money but for time. But actually, if I played video games, I think that would probably be one of the first ones on my list. And just from seeing the trailers and also Keanu Reeves' interaction with that game, looks pretty amazing. So I'm glad you guys. And one of the things is, I don't take Cyberpunk 2077 for granted. I think it's really awesome that a new generation of people can interact with Cyberpunk, and it will point them back to those books, right? By the way, I want to mention one more trilogy, and that's the Blue Ant trilogy. So that is also written by William Gibson. They are an amazing. There's pattern recognition in there. Spook Country and Zero History are all books within that series, and that series is a current series of now. It's a new series of books that are not Cyberpunk, that are written by William Gibson. They are absolutely stunningly beautiful books. They really changed my life in many ways. They're brilliant. They really are incredibly brilliant, and it's pretty amazing just to watch what they are and interact with those books. They are not Cyberpunk, but they wouldn't exist without Cyberpunk. And the reason why I say that is Cyberpunk made William Gibson a rich man. He's done extremely well. Those books are still sold today, and they are considered iconic science fiction books. They're actually considered classics, right? And so, but you really should take a look at the Blue Ant trilogy. That's what those books are called: Pattern Recognition, Zero History, and the other one, Spook Country. Really amazing. They truly are incredible books. You got to check them out. They're really, really amazing. And they are like this really relaxed second edition. Like they're a trilogy of books that an author that has no pressure from his from anyone, from his fans, from his editors, from the market would write. They're stunningly beautiful. They're incredible. If you're an author, if you're a game master, if you're a dungeon master, and you create stories, you got to see these books. They truly are incredible, and they only exist because William Gibson gained independence of wealth and was able to write exactly the books he wanted to write. So Cyberpunk is a seed, right? And it gave me a lot of joy in the 80s when I read the original Sprawl trilogy, right? And then it gave me more joy in the 90s when I read Bridge, the second Cyberpunk trilogy, and it gave me a lot of joy in the 2000s and the teens. I gotta learn what the name of those decades are. The aughts and the teens, I guess. From the Blue Ant trilogy. So William Gibson is a truly amazing author, and I just love his work, right? So let's talk about the elements of Cyberpunk that I love. So when I read the books, the stuff I really loved about Cyberpunk was it painted this incredibly detailed vision of what our future would be like. So in the 80s, William Gibson was saying, okay, we're going to have enhancements. We're going to have mechanical enhancements. We're going to have cybernetics in us, right? So the idea that my arm would be replaced with a mechanical arm, right? And not because my arm got chopped off, but I would go into a chop shop, they would chop my right arm off and give me this super dope, better, metallic arm that I would use for combat. That was definitely in the Sprawl trilogy, right? And of course it's amazing, right? So the idea of replacing my eye with an optics, with a set of powerful optics so that I can see in infrared, and so that I can do magnification at 50 times, so that I can, sit down and go into microscope mode. Excuse me. All that is amazing. Truly incredible, right? So really, really awesome vision of the future, right? And it also did create things like chop shops and the idea of organ legging, like today, if you're mugged, they'll be like, give me your wallet. But in the Cyberpunk world, if you're mugged, they will take you and harvest all your organs, right? It's just inherently more dangerous, all right? And also this idea of punk, right? And so Cyberpunk was punk in the future, and it's just so cool from so many levels. So you have that idea of, and by the way, if you're not aware, Cyberpunk really also totally birthed Blade Runner. Blade Runner, it only exists because of William Gibson's work, right? It's truly, Cyberpunk is the gift that keeps on giving. It has produced so many amazing pieces. And by the way, not just Blade Runner, but Blade Runner 2049. I was a huge fan of that film, and I think that film is very relevant and is an important inclusion in the cyberpunk milieu. Right? I love Cyberpunk. All right, so you have that. What else is there? The other thing is the aesthetic, the cyberpunk aesthetic. The cyberpunk aesthetic is trench coats and mirror shades, right? It's just super dope. It has its own unique style, right? And one of the things that's been really so amazing is, I remember reading these things, and then all these other mediums brought this to visual life, right? So of course Blade Runner brings it to life, and of course we have some amazing tabletop role-playing games like Cyberpunk 2020, like Shadowrun. I do consider Shadowrun a cyberpunk game. It's cyberpunk and fantasy. It's really amazing, and that's another thing. I don't want to forget this one, so I'm going to leave it here. Another thing, truly Cyberpunk is a seed that William Gibson planted, and that seed grew up into a tree, and that seed, kicked fruit. It grew fruit on its vines, and people ate the fruit. But that tree had seeds that fell into the ground, and others took those seeds and planted them elsewhere, right? And one of the things is Cyberpunk is really important, right? Because we have the tabletop role-playing game Cyberpunk 2020. It is an absolutely classic tabletop role-playing game. It's much beloved, right? And it's the purest form. If you want to play Cyberpunk, it's a much purer form. It's more pure to the vision of William Gibson than any other game, including Shadowrun. And from that comes Michael Pondsmith. Now, Michael Pondsmith is a very, very, very important tabletop role-playing game designer, and the reason why is he's African American, right? And the reality is, we have finally reached a point where there is diversity. There are people of color who are making amazing games quite regularly, right? But when Mike Pondsmith made Cyberpunk 2020, way back in I think the late 80s, maybe the early 90s, for our Talosorian, there were not a ton of people of color who were making tabletop role-playing games, right? And Mike Pondsmith really set the bar for minority tabletop role-playing game designers. And really, when he would show up at Gen Con and shake people's hands, there were minorities there who were saying, I can do this. This can be part of my life. And that's important. It's really important for our culture and our society. I have, Michael Pondsmith has a really special place in my heart. And also because of Michael Pondsmith's work on Cyberpunk 2020, we have amazing games that he created, right? Castle Falkenstein, if you've never played that, it is a fantastic game that Michael Pondsmith made. It's beautiful and brilliant and wonderful. And also Dream Park. Dream Park is one of my favorite tabletop role-playing games, and that comes directly from Michael Pondsmith. All right, so you have this idea of organ language. So Cyberpunk, you have the aesthetic. You have the trench coats and mirror shades. Also, katanas using like the idea of a street samurai comes straight out of the Cyberpunk novels. And this is somebody who has traded parts of their body for speed and strength, and now uses a katana to fight in the open. And it's completely awesome. It's really amazing, right? So the idea of a street samurai came from Cyberpunk, and now we can all envision a street samurai, somebody who's replaced one of their arms with cybernetics, someone who when you look at the veins in their flesh arm, it looks like wires, somebody who has replaced both eyes with gleaming optics packages, right? So these are all elements from Cyberpunk, and they really are amazing. The other idea is this idea of the Matrix, of Cyberpunk was one of the, this was back in the 80s. This was before the World Wide Web even existed, right? Or we were just seeing the nascent areas of it. And by the way, William Gibson is Canadian. He's not American. So it drives me crazy that I owe all my thanks for Cyberpunk to Canada. I really want to say Cyberpunk is an American thing. It's not. It's a Canadian thing. It's still cool. Still cool. But William Gibson is a Canadian author. And the thing is, it's just such a beautiful, wonderful, really rich, amazing world. And I really love everything about Cyberpunk. And I'm incredibly thankful to William Gibson for the incredible work that he did on this. So today I want you to think about street samurais. I want you to think about trench coats and mirror shades. And I want to say thank you very much to Bloodlord RPG for asking for this positive video about Cyberpunk. I was very happy to do it. It was a real joy. Thank you very much for letting me share my ideas with you today. I would love to hear your experiences with Cyberpunk in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.